All right, hi everyone. So today um, we'll be working on a mini project to help us familiarize ourselves with um, Composer, or not necessarily with Composer, but more like with the idea of namespacing. Okay. Um, all right. So the benefit of namespacing is only relevant in very large projects. So you have a lot of code you like to organize it properly. So with auto loading, it helps you organize your code into to have a folder structure, and you can have what is called a namespace to have like a logical mapping of where the code is to your folder. Okay, so take for example, we have this game controller. You can say it's the source controller, game controller, and it's under the namespace game store. So game store, this namespace is mapped to this source directory. Okay, if we go to our composer.json, we can see our PSL4 to loading. So we can see game store is mapped to the source directory. So anything under this source directory would be under the game store namespace. So we have controller, which is under source, and in controller we have game controller. So we can see game controller class, or whatever game controller is inside the namespace game store controller. All right. So, and then here we're trying to use uh, this game component, which is a class. Okay, it's located under the source directory. So under source, so it will be a game store. Then since it's directly under source, then it won't have, this will be the root namespace or its parent namespace. Okay, and then we use game to represent what is in this file, which is a class called game. Right. All right, so we'll do a mini application. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a game manager. Okay, it's going to be a very simple application, going to allow us to get a list of games, and it's also going to allow us to add a new game to the game store. All right. So we'll talk about persistence. How are we going to persist the data so that when we need it, we retrieve it. Okay, we'll discuss that. But for now, let's create the scaffolding for it. It's going to be a web application as well. So we'll start with the HTML. All right. So let's do that. So right now I'm using Sublime Text. Okay, this is a Sublime Text editor. I kind of prefer it to VS Code for simple applications, and if I don't want a lot of helpers or auto completion, it helps to um, that I get familiar and learn the nuances of the language without me having to depend on IntelliSense. Okay, helping you every time. Okay, but of course, we do have templates for things like HTML. So you can see I didn't have to type all this. I just have to do HTML, and pressing tab will complete the rest of it. Yeah. All right, so let's start with the title. Let's call it Game Store. And for body, we'll have two divs. Okay, so div, and then the first div will have our form. So we can call this, can give it the ID of form. So let's say ID, let's say game form, and here a we'll have a form. Okay, and in that form we're going to have two divs, or three divs actually. Right, so we want to be able to create games, right? And to create a game, we need a title and a description. So we're going to have two fields for that. So let's start with the first one. So say label title, and we use an input for this. So type will be text name. So since we need to submit this form, we need to give it a name so that we can retrieve the value from the request. So let's call this title and let's make it required. So that's necessary to provide that. And then we'll do for description. So we'll say description, and then we use text area. So we'll say name, the description, also going to make it required as well. And yeah, for text area, we don't need anything here, so that's fine. If you need to do Java, if you need to use JavaScript to intercept the form, you likely want to have some IDs, okay? But you could also use the form. If you give the form an ID, you could also link to this element using the name attribute. Yeah. And then we're going to have two buttons. Okay. How do we duplicate in Sublime Text? I need to check that. Okay, so the first button will be of type submit, and we're going to give it a name save. And the second one will be of type reset. We're going to call it clear. Right. Right. So there's our form, and here we're going to have our list. So let's call this game list, and this will have a list of games. Right. So for now, we'll just put some uh, placeholder data. So these are one of my favorite games. I used to play. I still love them. So if I have a chance, I've not had a chance to play them for a very long time. Yeah. All right. So let's see how this looks. Now to be able to run this, um, let's see. So we need to go to the directory, which is topics, and then we'll use the PHP inbuilt development server. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, start up the development server on this IP address, which maps to localhost, and on this port, which is 8000, and for folder, it will be the current folder. So the current folder would be where it will serve from, which is top. So let's check it out. So go to localhost 8000. Yeah, so we're here. However, we don't have, it's not showing up main.php. Why? Now this is because this is called main.php. If we had called it index, then it would easily reach that. So usually the convention is to name it index.php so that you don't have to bother with um, aliasing and all that, having to set up extra htdocs. So let's refresh. Now we have our form. Okay. Let's see. think maybe we need to zoom in a bit. So let's do that. Does it persist when we refresh? All right. Yeah, that's good. So let's test that. Let's try submitting. Okay, because we have required, we have validation if we don't provide anything, but it doesn't work for blanks. So you likely want to do some extra validation both on your client side, that's JavaScript, and also on the server side as well. So let's test. But for now, nothing happens because we don't do anything with it. Now, also, I would like you to notice something here. You can see that we have the title, title key. We have some key value pair or query parameters in our URL. This is because when we set up the form, we didn't tell it how to submit or which HTTP methods to submit the form with. Okay, now to right now we're submitting via get. However, we would like you to submit using post, so we need to set the method to post. So if we refresh this, now we try submitting. Let's see, yeah. Okay, yeah, I think, did we save? Yeah, we did save. Oh yeah, sorry, I put this not in the form, supposed to be in the form. Yes. And note it's going to submit to this page because we didn't specify an action. If we want to submit elsewhere, we want to do something like action, then that route we want it to submit. Okay, so let's try again. Yeah, yeah. All right, now we're submitting our post. All right, so let's also test the clear. Beautiful, it works. All right, I think I may need to make some adjustments here. Hmm. All right, this is strange. Okay, yes, so we do have some allies, but we don't have a container for it. So is it UL? Is it OL? OL will be ordered list, so you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D. And you have UL, which you can just use for bullets. So if you want to use UL, that's on ordered list. Could just take this, tap this, have this here, save, and yeah. So this is what we want to achieve. All right. So let's start with loading these things from some with PHP. Okay, right now this is just HTML. Right, so we'll start with the game list. So we have a controller that handles the list of games. Now, if you extracted the topics or you've created this structure based on our last video, you realize that some folders are missing, which is our models and controllers. Okay, so we no longer need them anymore. And also we have this archives folder, which uh, which is where I stored the last main.php file. So if you check, you'd see what we had before. Okay, just moved everything here. Right, and you notice that this was static before. Yeah, so but now we'll make it an instance so that we can create an instance of the controller. All right, so let's try to load the games from this list here. All right. Now, since we're in the game controller, you could actually just call this list instead of list games. Okay, since we already have the context that this is the game controller. Okay, so let's do some PHP. So start the PHP here and end it here. So first, we need to import this game controller. So we need to know where it is. So game store controller, game controller. So let's do that. So use game store controller, game controller. All right. So with that, we can create an instance of the controller. Maybe we can call it game controller. But since we have only one controller, we just call it controller, right? And let's fetch the list of games. So we can say games equals game controller list, right? So this will get the list of games, and we can replace this static list with a dynamic list. Now to do that, you can use PHP in HTML, but we need to switch the context to PHP. So right now here with this switches the context to PHP. Everything here is PHP till it reaches this. Now everything from here is no longer PHP and to just render as is. Okay, so once this to render the list of games from this list, not from our static list. So let's do that. So we'll say PHP for each games as game. Then we exit the PHP context. And in here, we resume the PHP context to end this for each. And then we switch back or switch out from the PHP context. All right, so for every game we have, this list would be rendered, or this list item would be rendered. So let's check to see if it works. Okay, so we have an error. Let's see what happened. Right, so it says page reflected error, unport error, class game store, controller item controller not found. Why, you may ask? Well, this is because we haven't imported the autoloader. So we haven't required the autoloader. So this PHP file does not know where game controller is coming from. Okay, so for us to be able to do that, we can do require once and then do vendor, which is this folder here, then autoload.php, which is this file here. All right. Now let's refresh once again. All right, so we have a list of games, but notice it's still static. That's because we aren't rendering the actual games in this for each loop. We're just printing this for every game we have. So now to do that, let's switch out. Switch to the page context. Let's do echo uh, game get title. Right. Then we can switch out of the PHP context. Right. Now there is a shorthand for this. There's a shorthand for each and echo when you're using um when you're using PHP in HTML. Okay, I think it's used to be something like this. From correct, but I'm not really sure. But there is a shorthand syntax for that. Let's see if this works. I'm not sure if this is the syntax, but let's see. Oh yeah, it is. All right, so that's solves our problem. But I prefer to be explicit. But for echoes, we could just use this. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we have our list of games. So the next thing would be to like submit the games and actually store them. But we have a problem. We aren't storing. This list is a fixed list. We want to be able to, if we save this game, now PHP is request and response. The moment it's not in memory. Okay, so when you make a call to a PHP script, it loads everything in the script for as long as that request is ongoing. However, as soon as you respond, as soon as the response is sent fully back to the client, the PHP script is dismissed from memory, which means everything that's loaded, it loaded up till that time will be gone. Okay, so let's simulate that. So let's say now, if we use this, our list is kind of static because we're always recreating the list. However, what if we have some form of storage in this class? Let's say we have something like private array, let's say games. Okay, and let's say in our constructor, we'll initialize the default game. So say construct, uh, let's do this. Then we can have the syntax, cut this, create our default games, and then set it to the games array. All right, so let's see. All right, so we are assigning it to the array itself. So we can say Naruto and COD, right? So with that, we just need to return this games. So whatever is in games will be returned. And let's see if our code still works. Yeah, it does still work. Now what happens when we submit a new game into this list? Right, so let's do that. So we would work on our logic for adding game. So call it add, and here we'll expect a title, which will be a string. We'll expect a description, which will be a string as well. Won't be returning anything, so just make it void. Maybe we could return error messages, but now we won't worry about that. Alright, so we create a new game object. So say new game, and then we pass in the title and the description, and then we store that into the list of games. Let's say game. All right. So how do we get this data and store it here? Well, so we need to, so two type of requests can get us here, either get or post. If we just go straight to the page, that's a get request. We don't need to submit the form. But if we submit the form, we need to save, we need to validate the form. And once we're done with that, we need to render this list. So we're rendering this list regardless of whether it's a post or get request. However, if it's a post request, we would handle the form. So we can check to see if this is a post or a GET request, then handle the form if it's a post request. And then regardless of what happens, we will render the list of games. So which means this is necessary. However, this will be executed, or this should be executed after we've checked if this is a GET or a POST request that's calling the script. So how do we do that? Now we can check our from can check our global. So we have a global called request. So let's see what's in there. Is the var dump. Oh yeah, sorry, not request. Um, sorry, yeah, request. Exactly. So let's die here, not in reality anyways. Alright, so right now it's empty, right? So let's see what happens when we submit a form. Uh, let's see. Yeah, yeah. Right. Now you can see we have the title which was submitted, the title field, and we have the description. So we have a way to extract the title and the description from the request payload. So we can do something like title equals request followed by title, and then we can have description, which would be request description, right? However, if we do this without checking if it's a GET or a POST request, it would be to ruin the experience. It won't be the proper way to check it. We need to only do this code if it's a POST request. Okay, so how do we know if this request is a POST request? Well, we could check another object called server. Right, so let's do that. Right, so server has a lot of stuff. Okay, document root, remote address, all that. So what we need is the request method. So request method contains which HTTP method was used to call this script. Okay, and if it's a post request, the HTTP method a will be a post. Okay, so let's get the method. So we'll do um, HTTP method equals server followed by that's the name of the key request method, and that must be exactly that. And then we can say if HTTP method is equal to post, then we do this. Or if it's not post, then we don't, this code doesn't get executed and it just gets us our list of games. So let's do that. All right, so we're here. And if this is a post method, it will get the title and description. And we could even try var dumping that. Let's see, title. Right, let's die here. Let's see, yeah, yeah. All right, so we've been able to get the title only when this request was a post. All right, so let's undo that. So let's store the title and description. So we've gotten the title, we've gotten description. Now you might want to do some kind of validation to check if it's empty or not. Okay. Maybe do something like uh, if empty, then you pass maybe the title, or if empty, and then you pass the description is empty, then you can, well, return some kind of error or something. Yeah. For now, let's do, let's just do some simple validation. We can have something like error message. Let's see. Okay, it will be blank, and then if one of it is empty, we could just store maybe the title or description is blank, or we can say the title or description cannot be blank, something like that. And then we could render some kind of error somewhere. Maybe we could say um, PHP if error message. We could do if error message, or if error message is not empty, if it's not empty, then we can render something like what can we use? So some kind of error default PHP element. Sorry, HTML element. Right, let's just use a span. Maybe we could style it. Let's see, style. What can we use for styling? Let's say border color. Let's do red. Yeah. And here we just echo out the error message. So we'll see error message. All right. So, but this won't work if we don't trim it. So maybe we can do a trim here to remove any blank spaces. Okay, so let's check that out again. Let's see, submit, and now we have this error message here. But I think my CSS skills is very bad, so I can't see any borders. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but maybe I'm colorblind or something. There are no borders. All right, so however, if this is not, then we do that. So if this was like a method, it would be nice to do an early return here. Okay, however, it's not. So yeah. And also we could handle this in a controller, okay, as well. We can handle that in our controller, all the stream and all that. We could pass the request object itself to the request global variable, or we could even access it here without even having to do all this here. And maybe we could have an error message property here, so we could have something like string, which can be null, nullable string. Going to call it error message. Okay, it will be empty by, well, since it's null, we could just leave it uninitialized, and we should be able to access this request object here. So we could move this code here out. So we set the error message. So because the error message is within this controller, so we'll do this dot error message. But then if we make it private, it won't um, it won't be accessible. So maybe you might want to have a getter. Okay, probably something like public function get error message. Okay, um, which we can say this will turn either string or null. Okay, so I have this initialized to null by default, and we can see return this error message, right? So here, if the title is either empty, if the title is empty or description is empty, then we store this error. Here, store this error message in the error message variable, and we can return here. So no need to continue execution. Yeah, no need to continue execution. And here we could just have game controller app, right? Okay, so let's see if that works. So let's add space, Okay, yes, so we need to, so we no longer need this. We now need to get game controller get error message. Right. Right, so let's do space. Not working as it should. Why? Hmm. So this message which is here, and let's see. So there is an error somewhere. Let's see if this line of code is executed. All right, so it's actually executed. So if we return, let's see. Okay, they should have this stored here. Get a message, we get this value here. Okay, so uh, okay, let's do. Oh yes, we're checking the wrong. We're supposed to check this. Okay, so let's take this and store it in here. Great. All right, we now have our validation working, so we can remove this debugging line here. So we're good to go. All right, now you might ask, we didn't pass this request object into this function add. Okay, so why was it able to access it? Well, this is what you call a global variable. So we have a lot of global variable like the server, we have session, we have request, which we're saying here. I think there are a few others. And, might have forgotten, or I have forgotten. Yeah, so we have env, we have guest, we have post files for getting um files from the request cookie. Okay, so I think these are the um popular ones. Yeah. All right. So now we've stored our game. So if this is empty, we try an error, but if it's not, what happens? So let's see what. Let's submit some real data. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. All right. All right. So seems to work, right? So we submitted a new game and it has been stored in the list. Now watch what happens when we refresh this page. It's gone. Why? Because we didn't persist it anyways. It's valid for that particular life cycle of the request. But as soon as the request is gone, everything in memory for that script or that was loaded for that script gets cleared up. So the moment we make this request to this page again, everything starts from the beginning. The game controller instance is created from scratch, okay, which will lead to constructing a new set of games, which is going to be the same set of games in this list, and then that would be rendered here. So this is why we need persistence. So the question is, how do we persist this data? Well, we could use a database, or we could use files. We could also use um, maybe something like an API client to hold or to handle the data. I'm just going to go for something simple, which would be the um, a JSON object, which will store locally, right? So how do we do that? So first, I will create a helper class to assist with reading and writing from files. So we're just going to call it tail. And here we're going to have a file. Let's call it file manager, right? .php, right? Right. So we're also going to make it part of the namespace. So remember, source, right? Source maps to game store. Okay. Source maps to game store. So we'll say namespace, game store. Then we are in the util folder. So we'll say util. So that will be the namespace, right? So we'll say class file manager. So this will contain code to help us read and write from files. Right. So how do we proceed from here? So we're going to have two static functions. So say public static function read file. We're going to call it read. Um, let's call it read game storage. Right. So say read from storage. Say public static function write to storage. Right. So read to storage or read from storage. So how do we do that? Mm, so first we would do file exists. So we're going to have a default file name. So say uh, private static const. We're going to call this going to call this let's say game file or games file, right? And this would be, I just call it games.json. Right, so to read, let's check if the file exists. So now we need to determine where is this file going to be stored. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create a folder, call it resources, and then in resources, it will be stored in this folder. So we need to get this path. So where is resources, right? Now, from the context of this file, we are here, resources is here. So we need to go up one level to where the util folder is. Okay, so we are in util, we need to go up one level to the source folder. Then we go up one level to the topics folder, and in topics we have resources, and then we can have the file in there. So how do we get the current folder? You can see file exists and we give it a file name. So, but then where is the file? So we can get the current directory by doing there. Okay. So first, let's see what happens when we do there. So let's echo there. Let's do PHP here. Let's see. All right. So here, let's die here so that we don't load anything else. And then we do use game store util file manager. And then we can have, let's see, file manager. I think what did we call it? Read from storage. Yeah. So let's say read from storage. Let's see what happens when we run this. Right, so yes, so now you static modifier on class constants. Okay, okay, yes. This is not Kotlin. So, all right, so you can see we are here. So that points to home, Ahmed, me, learning topics, source, util. So we need to go one level up. Okay, so how do we do that? Let's see what happens with this combination dot. Right now, what I want us to do is to go this. We need to go back this folder. Okay. However, can we trace? Is it possible for us to extract the parent folder from util? Right. We want to be able to go back. So let's check PHP docs, php.net. Okay, let's see. Which class is this? Hmm, nice class, but that's not what we want. Uh, let's do, yeah, let's see what's in the directory name. So we have this directory iterator class. I think it can help us navigate to, what is this to? Right, so provide a simple interface within the contents of our system directory. Right, so with this, we have access to currents. Let's see what that gets us. So let's see, echo directory, directory iterator. Okay, so there's the native iterator currents, then PHP URL. Let's see what that gets us. Right, so let's see, it's directories are not found, which means this might not be native to PHP, or it might have to be in a different namespace. Okay, yes, this is a static method, but then it couldn't find the class itself. Okay, yeah, we need to tell it that this is a root class, so we'll say use directory iterator. So this is in the root namespace for PHP. Right, so let's see. So now, yeah, so we can see it now, but it's not, we need to create an instance of directory iterator before we can use it. Right, so let's see. All right, so let's create an instance of that here. So we'll say, uh, try to keep the private methods above. So say private, um, then I try iterator, say iterator, let's just call it directory iterator, or let's call it, what do we call it? Explore equals to new. Okay, we can't really do that here, but we can do that in the constructor. This, but we need to load this statically. So that will be where the issue is. So we need to load this statically. So we need to create this once. Okay, but we can't really do this in PHP, can we? Actually, let's see, we can do that. Yep, we can. So as you can see, new expressions are not supported in this context. Yeah, we could create a static function to get it. So maybe I could say private function get directory. Okay, but let's just solve the problem first, shall we? So let's create an instance of that. Comment this, and then let's use explorer get current to get the current folder. Okay, so let's see what's there. Syntax. Okay, yes, 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 yes. Hmm. Need to remove this. Okay, what's wrong now? Expected. Okay, so we need to pass a parameter, an argument, which is it takes a directory. So let's pass the current directory to it. So do dir. Okay, let's see. So fresh, right? So now we are here, right? So we need to go back to directories. So let's do that. Um, let's say get base name, get extensions, dots, next. So we need something. Would this be useful to us? We need to be able to move forward. Next. So let's see what happens when we do explore rewind before seeking. Hmm. I don't think this helps us. So let's see. Okay, I think this just helps us to check within a directory. Doesn't help us to navigate the file system. And so we need something that can go through the file system. So let's check this. Uh, yep, there's no. Okay, so let's do this, right? Let's take this forward. Oh, it still doesn't work. All right, so let's see. Go. How to navigate to parent folder in PHP. I realized I never needed to go to a parent folder. I always used the library to do that. Uh, Yeah, there's that iterator we're using. Then um, doesn't give us what we need. So Danny returns the parent directory. Okay. So path Danny is return the current one. I need to be able to um, All right, so let's try to have more than way to do this, but let's do it this way. So we do file path equals dot, which will be the parent folder, then resources, then we can call this games file. Then if file exists, so if the maybe I could call this file name. Okay. So if the file doesn't exist, we want to create it, right? So I think there's a way to create file. The file create. Okay, let's do put contents file name. Remember, we need to have this, and the data would be well, what I want to append here. So we'll just have. So we want to have a JSON, want to store a JSON array. So something like this, something like this. And then in here, we can have something to represent the game object. So we can see title, Naruto, description, let's see, a nice game, something like that. Okay, this is what I want. But by default, it should be empty. So if the file doesn't exist, we'll just put an empty array in there. And then we read the contents of the file. So we'll say return file get contents. Then we'll pass the file. Okay, this will get us the contents of that file. Okay, we can even have read from JSON, but let's see what happens when we get the contents. Let's see if it works. So we'll do contents equals to this, and when we do a var dump of the contents, right? Let's see if that works. Okay, so we have 500. Let's see. Undefined constant. Let's see. Games file. How do we refer to constants here? Okay, self, yes. Right, so we have this, which means this did not exist. We didn't have a file in that. So when we check dot resources games.json, there was no file in there. So that's the idea. If file doesn't exist, but then this was on which line? This was on line. Where's the line? Line 18, line 16, which is here. Yeah. So which means this doesn't exist. So let's see. We are here. So that will point us. So dot, we are here. So dot will take us here. And here we have resources. Okay, so which means we should have a single dot. So let's refresh and see. So resources games.json failed to open string. No such file directory. Let's see. Oh yeah, I think we need path info to help us with that. Uh, yes, so we need to use this. So let's see if that helps us. So um yeah, so we need the name. Okay, so we need the directory. So the Danny. Or okay, this would only work if we have a path. So let's see. So let's say info, path info. Let's say file path. Yes. So then if let's say file name, the file path, and let's say file name, right? Okay, let's see. There's a function join join path. So if we have that, we can join it, but I'm not sure if this is it. But let's see. Let's see what happens when we execute this. Oh, nice. It worked. So let's say if the file was actually created. Nope, it wasn't created. It was. So why wasn't it created? So let's do this again. Okay, let's open folder. We don't have any file. So let's see. Why wasn't the actual file created? Okay, let's echo what we have here. So echo file name. Let's see what the name of the file would be. Games, which is not what we want. Hmm. Okay, let's echo. Let's do a var dump of file path. Let's see what we have. Alright, so that name resources, page name, game, JSON extension, JSON file name. So whether we want this, we want it to create this file. So what we want is page name. But even if it doesn't create that, it should have created games, but it didn't. Hmm. I think there's this stuff we need to learn. Hmm. Think how to create a file in a parent folder. So 2 levels up from the current folder in PHP. Let's see, let's see the example code. So use Danny this. Okay. And I think we could just use Dan instead of Dan name file. Okay. All right. So let's uncomplicate our code here. So let's say Dan name Dan followed by the name of the file, which is self game file. All right. Let's see if that works. No. Okay, we don't have that folder. Okay, yes, so we have this is in source. So okay, we need to go above source. So let's delete it's not what we want. So okay, which is where yeah. So let's see that name. Okay, so yeah, I guess that's where the file comes in, which means this file. So file, right? So let's see what happens. Right, we have resource. This system. Okay, we have games now, but we need to name name games. Which was good. Let's run it again. Let's see. Okay, source games. Okay, so this one. Was that what we needed? This. Let's delete this. Okay, yeah. So we're making progress. So we have games.json. Great. But that's not what we want. We need this. So this is here. We need this apple. So let's do that. Okay, now it's here. So we're getting somewhere. Right. So in this directory, go down in that name. So we get the topic. So we are in topics now, which is what we want. So now we need to go into resources. Yeah, so this is where we want to save this file, right? So let's do that. Yes, so we now have a JSON file. Great. So we can, with this, we can isolate this code into a static function. I can say private static function get file, get games file. We can return this, right? We can also say return a string here. and then our file name can be equals to self get games file. Right. We also don't need the dump. So let's remove this. Let's remove this. Let's remove this once again, just to confirm everything works. Yep. So we have the file games.json. Right. So how do we write to storage? When we write to storage, we need the contents we're writing into. So contents, and we could just see file name equals to self get games file, and then we can say file put contents, and we specify the name of the file, which is file name, followed by the content, which would be right. So we have a file manager that will help us read and write from file, right? So we go to the next portion of the code, which is to persist this. So we need to make sure we are reading these games from the file. Okay, we can set a list of default games. So let's do that. So say title, let's see, title is this, and description is this. Alright, so we have one game in the JSON file. So let's read that. Good. Alright, so how do we use the content of the file? So in the constructor, we'll need to initialize this anymore. We can comment out this code, and here what we need to do is we get file, or let's see, JSON equals JSON decode. Then we say file manager, then read from storage. But then we've not imported file manager, so let's do use game store util file manager, right? So with this, we decode the JSON, which will have a JSON. But then do we decode as associative array or not? So I think by default, we have to specify that. So when true, let's see when no. Return as associative array object, whether or not. So let's be explicit. So let's see true. And then we'll have a JSON. So in this JSON, we'll have an array of games, and then we can pass this array of games. So we could say, games, right, equals array map. So we'll have a callback, which would be, let's see, fn. We'll have a, let's see, let's call it game entry. And here, this game entry will map to new instance of game. And in there, we can put our title and our description. Right. Then the array we'll be using is this JSON. And then we can return those games. So games. Alright, so now to see if this works, let's comment this code here and refresh. Nice, so we have our first game. Now if you're wondering what did I just do here? Well, this is using a what's it called? A callable, okay, and it's kind of the same as doing games equals to an empty array, then doing it for each on the JSON itself. So you can see JSON, uh, JSON, let's say game entry, and then doing game games equals new game, then game entry, title, and then game game entry description. So it's basically the same thing. Okay, but with this, the syntax is more precise. Can you save yourself some unnecessary lines? Okay, so just for reference purposes, for reference purposes, same as logic, same functionality as array map output. All right. So now we're able to load our themes from the JSON file. So how can we persist the games into the JSON file? All right. So first we need to be able to read and write from the storage. Okay, so now we've been able to read, so want to write to the storage. So at this point we have a new game. How can we write the game back into the storage? Okay, so first we need to get the list of games. So we could have, so with this, we could have this function. We could have a function get game from storage, something like that. So you can say private function uh, fetch games from storage. And that will contain the logic for fetching the game so that we don't have to repeat it. So I'm going to copy this code here, and we're going to say we are expecting an array. All right. So now we just need to have, okay, yes, we still need this code as well. So let's move that as well. All right. So, so this is what you call encapsulation. Okay. So yeah, what I say, you could call it abstraction as well, in the sense that we're abstracting logic from, you don't need to care about the technicalities, how it works. We just provide you an interface where you call and then, which is the method, and it handles all the behind the scenes work that needs to be done to get that data. So instead of repeating the code, we we've what I say abstracted it away from you so you don't have to care about the technicalities here. So whenever we need a list of games, we just say, or we could just return this directly. We can say this get games from or fetch games from storage. I think that's what we called it. Yes, we just return that. Okay. Over here, once we got to the new game, we fetch the games from storage by calling this method here. And then we add this to the list of to the current list of games. So we say game, and then we need to persist this game back into the storage. So we can have a function for that. So we can say private function, let's say save games to storage. Okay, so this will be void. You don't need anything back. And first we need to get the games. So say games. This will be the games. We need to save it as JSON. But remember, these games are actually instances of game objects, not associative arrays. So we need to convert them back to associative arrays. So we can see normalized games, or we could even use the array map. So we could say array map, and we'll do fn. We'll have game to be an instance of game. So so that we can have our type. Okay, then we can say hmm, think we can do hmm, this will be good for a one-liner. So let's make a helper function that maps games back to associative array. So if we go to our game definition, let's create a helper function. So say function to array, right? This will return an array. All we need to do is return title will map to this title, and then description will map to this description. Yeah, that's all we need. And um, so here we could just use that by saying game array. This should solve everything. And then we pass the games. So that's where we are getting the items we are mapping to this associative array. So here we get list of normalized games, and with that list of normalized games, we can have it as JSON. So we can say JSON equals to JSON encode, and we pass that normalized games, and then with that we can persist it to the storage. Okay, and we do that. We'll say file manager write to storage. Thing. Not sure if that's what, yeah, write to storage. And we pass the content of the JSON, which will be a string at this point. So JSON, so this will persist it, or this should persist it back into the file. So let's see if we to do that, we get the file name. right? So once we've gotten the games, we are going to call our private method, which will be save games to storage. So pass the array of games, and with that, we're done, right? So let's see if this works. We need to change anything here? No. All right, so now we just have only one game. You can see it's always loading from storage. So let's add a new game. Let's say Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. And you can see a nice FPS. Beautiful. As you can see, it's always persisted in the storage. Okay, even if we stop the server, start it up again, it's always persisted in storage. And if we check our games.json, we can see the new game in there. All right, so this is our simple app. So things we learned. Hopefully, you learned how to um, abstract or encapsulate your code, that is, organize your code. You can see the index.php just handles the view logic, the business logic of storing and retrieving the, what I say, the games is handled by the controller. So this is one of the patterns you see in web applications. Yeah. So let's see the controller. So the controller handles the logic of it handles the request and gives a response. Though technically that's not true here because we are kind of handling the request here. So we are trying to check if it's post, get, but we could make it much nicer. We could have something like handle that does the handoff of the request. So maybe we can do something like that, right? So, but the idea is that the main logic will be handled by the controller. Probably could call this a service, okay, or a repository. So here, the list method handles the listing of games. That is this section here. So here we get the fetch list of games on storage, which goes to our private method, which loads the games from the storage as JSON. So our file manager handles the logic of fetching the files. So here we learned that one of the um, advantages of AI, we could give them a query like how we did here, and it can give us step by step of how to solve the problem. And you don't necessarily have to use the code, and it's best if you type out the code and copy it. Okay, so we were able to get the logic for going to our parent folder. So current folder, we get the directory name of the current folder, which will be util, okay, which will be util. So that will be util source, okay, would be the directory name, okay, and then the topics will be the directory name. So in topics, we are navigating to resources, and then we're navigating to gives.json, which we have here, we stored here statically, right? Okay, so with this, if we try reading from storage, we check to see if the file exists so that we don't run into um, found not found errors. So we check if the file doesn't exist, we write to the file with an empty array. Okay, and then we fetch the contents of the file again. However, for writing, if the file doesn't exist, it doesn't matter. It will create the file if the file doesn't exist. Yeah. And with this, we could even we use the logic. Let's say we have maybe categories, we have the categories file. All we just need to do is maybe refactor this function to maybe something like get resource file, and then we pass the maybe the file type, or maybe you can say resource, and then we could just pass the resource here. So maybe the resource can be this games.json. So we could pass the resource here, say resource, okay. And here, all we need to do, we'll call this get resource file, and then we pass the resource. So we can say self dot game file or games file. Yeah. And we can pass that as well to the resource file. So this can help you reuse. So if you have another file, let's say private const categories file, and probably you want to call this categories.json or even .text, up to you. All you just need to do, maybe you have public function get category file. Okay, so you do something like return um, self get resource file, and then you pass self category file. Yeah, so this allows you to reuse this function here. I think I like it this way, even though we won't really have another file. Maybe we will in the near future. Yeah, and then we have and if it's post, okay, we have the add method which handles the logic for handling the for adding the game to the storage. So what it does, it will check the request if all is good, then it will create a game. If it's not, then it will persist the error, and from that we can, what I say, display the error to the user here to give a nice user experience. And when we, if there's no error, then we create an instance of game, and we fetch the current list of games on the storage. We add that game to the list of games, and then we persist it to a storage, which requires us to get the game as array, and then what do I say? For each game, we convert it to array and then persist it into this normalized games array. Then we encode it as JSON. Then we write it to storage. Okay. All right. Um, one other thing. Yeah, we could also actually make this nicer as well. Instead of having to create a new instance, okay, what we can do is we can create another helper function, but this will be static. Okay, so this would be instance because it's the context is the current game, not the idea of a game, not the game prototype or the class, but the instance of the game, the object. So this is related to the instance. So that's why we're using this title, this description for this particular instance. But we want to make this other one static so that we can easily create game objects from an associative array. So we can say from array, and we get the associative array. So let's call this data. And then this will return an instance of game, or we could just say self. Okay, self is very nice so that in case you change the name maybe to games or games model, you won't have errors here because whatever this class is, will be what self would be. All right, so then we can say return new game instance, or you could say return new self. Then you pass the title. So if you know the keys, then you say title and then data description. Now, because we control the logic on the server, know this. We know that it will definitely be title and description. But then someone might pass an empty array, okay, or an invalid object. So if you pass something that's not an array, we already have type safety here by specifying this is an array. So you can pass an object. Okay. However, if you pass an empty array, this will fail because we won't have an element with this particular key. Okay. So you might want to do some validation whenever you do this. Okay. And then with that, we can, instead of saying this, we could shorten our code to game from array. Then we pass the game entry to it. So this shortens our code. So just to confirm, yep, yes, yeah. So there's one. All right, so let's see if it still works. Seems so. So let's try adding another game. Let's see what other game do I enjoy. Ridge Racer 2 on PSP and PS Vita. Okay, you can see an awesome racing game. Right, so save, it works, refresh, still persistent. Right, thanks for watching and see you guys in the next one.